I've said once before that I'm no genie about assassinations. Some of them have been very easy to solve. It's just that the government won't let you tell anybody. However, I'm not saying it was an assassination by the government. But what I'm saying is there are a lot of people that are studying this thing, and I ran up on a couple of them and talked and so forth. So I started, taking a look at things. And I found a couple of things that I think are pretty interesting. We're going to show you a little snippet of a YouTube. If you looked at a lot of YouTubes, you will see the ones that the Central Intelligence Agency had made up. And they talk about JFK Jr. as just almost a horrible person. It's, he was thought he was the best thing on God's earth. He was, handsome and was going to be a movie star. And they go on and on and on for like 10 minutes about, he thought he could do anything, He didn't have another pilot with him. He didn't understand. And the family says that he did this, and the family says that he did that, and it was making like the family was talking about him. I want to show you so you can see what they do, how they do it.
Many people discouraged John from flying, including his sister Caroline, his wife Carolyn, and many of his friends. John initially flew an aircraft that was appropriate for his skill level, a Cessna Skylane 182, but in April of 1999, he purchased a Piper Saratoga. This plane was much more complicated, and it had 300 horsepower, which was about 70 more than the Cessna. On July 16, 1999, John Kennedy was planning on flying his Piper Saratoga from New Jersey to Hyannisport, Massachusetts, to attend the wedding of his cousin, Rory Kennedy. His wife Carolyn was going to attend as well. Her sister, Lauren Bissett, was on board the aircraft with them, but she was supposed to be dropped off at Martha's Vineyard Airport, after which John and Carolyn would continue to Hyannisport. John departed from the Essex County Airport in Fairfield, New Jersey at 8:38 p.m. The visibility that evening was reported as 9 miles. John was only permitted to fly under VFR, Visual Flight Rules, which means he would navigate by simply looking out of the window. He could see the horizon, he could identify different landmarks. This is easier to do in the day, but of course he started flying at twilight, which was quickly turning into night. John had received some training on IFR, Instrument Flight Rules, but was not competent to fly by instruments alone. At 9:38 p.m., over the ocean, John engaged in an unusual series of maneuvers. He turned the plane right and descended to 2,200 feet, but then he climbed for 30 seconds and returned to level flight at 2,500 feet. A few minutes later, he climbed another 100 feet and turned the plane left. He was once again headed toward the ocean, this time at a rate of 900 feet per minute. He then turned right and started descending at a rate of 4,700 feet per minute. At 9:41 p.m., he slammed his plane into the ocean nose first. John Kennedy, his wife, and her sister were all killed on impact. When the airspeed indicator was recovered, it was stuck at the highest speed it could record. The plane was reported missing at 2:15 a.m. on July 17, and an extensive search was initiated within a few hours. On July 19, searchers found fragments of John's plane. The bodies were recovered on July 21. All 3 of them were strapped into their seats. Now moving to my analysis. The official cause of the crash was spatial disorientation. John lost track of where he was and which way he was moving. He ended up flying directly into the water, probably thinking he was maneuvering himself out of trouble. What happens with spatial disorientation is that the pilot feels like they're moving in a certain direction when they're not. Instead of trusting their instruments, they trust their feelings. This often leads to disaster. Most crashes like this are caused by many factors rather than one major catastrophic failure. Let's take a look at the factors involved in John Kennedy's crash. John Kennedy had a number of stressors in his life at the time of the crash. One notable concern involved the financial failure of his magazine. He had just lost funding and was in real trouble. John was paying the price for never really having any type of plan or skill in business. In addition to financial stressors, John Kennedy had marital stressors. He was not communicating well with Carolyn. She had mood swings and used substances, which probably did not help their marriage. John Kennedy received his pilot's license only about 15 months before the crash and received his high-performance airplane and complex airplane endorsements only about 2 months before the crash. He had only flown the Piper Cherokee for a total of 36 hours. Only 9 of those hours were at night. The Piper Cherokee was just too much plane for John to handle. He wasn't prepared for it. A certified flight instructor offered to fly with John on this trip. Because the instructor recognized John's inexperience, John refused the offer, saying that he wanted to do it alone. Due to traffic conditions, John arrived at the airport in New Jersey later than expected. Carolyn arrived even later than he did. John was planning on departing at 6 p.m., but didn't take off until 8:38 p.m. Therefore, it was darker when he took off than he was hoping for. 6 weeks earlier, he had broken his left ankle in a paragliding accident. The cast had just come off the day before the flight. He was using crutches to make his way to the aircraft. John never filed a flight plan. This wasn't required, but it is strongly recommended. Not having a flight plan impedes rescue efforts because no one knows the exact route of the aircraft. In this particular case, this factor did not make a difference because all 3 individuals died on impact. It's been reported that John never transmitted a distress call. Investigators later discovered that both of his radios had been set to the incorrect frequencies. There was one report, however, from a radio operator at Republic Airport in Farmingdale, New York, who said he picked up distress calls that may have been from John Kennedy. The operator reported that John said, "We're not going to make it." It's not known for certain if the operator was actually talking to John Kennedy. The visibility that evening was reported as 9 miles. Some have argued that it may have actually been closer to 5 miles. Another pilot who was getting ready to make the same trip decided not to fly because of poor visibility. John flew too close to an American Airlines flight. This may indicate that John was distracted. John flew along the coast for a while, which was a smart move because it gave him a landmark by which he could navigate. For example, he could see lights near the coast. Ideally, he would have continued along the coast and then turned south to Martha's Vineyard, minimizing his time over the water and maximizing his time in sight of landmarks. Instead, perhaps in a hurry to get to Martha's Vineyard, John departed from the coast too early and flew over the open ocean. This meant that he lost his visual references, and if he had lost power, he would have been forced to land on the water, which is very dangerous. John Kennedy's aircraft was equipped with an autopilot. Records indicate that the autopilot had failed twice before. It's not clear if it was functional on July 16, 1999. This leaves 2 possibilities. It was non-functional, therefore John was irresponsible to fly the aircraft, or it was functional, and for some reason he decided not to activate it. If he had used it, it would have guided the plane right to the airport. I wonder if he didn't turn it on because he wanted to accomplish this flight without assistance, just like when he denied the assistance from the certified flight instructor. He wanted to do it alone. He might have viewed turning on the autopilot as admitting a weakness. When considering all the factors involved in this case, it's clear that it was John Kennedy's reckless behavior that brought an end to his life and 2 passengers. Moving to the next question, how did John Kennedy's personality contribute to his death? John Kennedy was put in an interesting position by being born the son of JFK. A lot was expected of him. Many people hoped he would run for office. Photographers and reporters were always paying attention to him. He's the closest the United States has ever come to having a prince. He appeared to have high openness to experience, low conscientiousness, very high extroversion, mid-range agreeableness, and low to mid-range neuroticism. John Kennedy was not particularly intelligent, but the demands that were put on him required intelligence. These expectations exceeded his capabilities. This put a lot of stress on John. There was a sense that he was always trying to figure out his purpose in life, and never really achieved that goal. He did not know how to get out of his father's shadow. As if this wasn't difficult enough, John was a notorious risk-taker. He was high sensation-seeking. He made a number of poor decisions and nearly facilitated his own death a few times. John had a particular interest in aviation, which is a very dangerous way to express sensation-seeking. It was reported that John did not have the ability to think in a logical fashion. He could not interpret data accurately and make a decision based on that interpretation. His problem-solving skills were not orderly. He struggled with linear thought. For example, he had difficulty going down a checklist to solve a problem. A pilot who can't use a checklist is like a firefighter that refuses to use water. John Kennedy was unable to learn from his mistakes. When he crashed his paraglider and broke his ankle, he refused to admit responsibility. Instead, he thought it was a sign to spend more time with his dying cousin. John selected a fanciful explanation instead of the actual explanation, namely, he was incompetent and reckless. There's a parallel between the way John lived his life and how it concluded. Both involve versions of disorientation.
What I do know is that there's a book out I bought the book. That book said there was some sort of a hearing of some type. There might have been a grand jury, although I couldn't find that when I looked it up yesterday. However, I was reading it, and I remember his name. It was a big Irish name. In the investigation, he had talked to a number of people who lived close to the shore in Massachusetts or the area there. They gave evidence of things that they saw. Also, he had evidence of some people who worked at the airport in New Jersey that young Kennedy kept his airplane at. He had been flying for as many as like 17 years, on and off, on and off. And he had his own plane, which was a kind of a starter plane, easy to fly. And he had just gotten a new plane, much more powerful and much more advanced. And he had about 39 hours in that plane, so it wasn't like going up for the first time. The people, these people at the airport, they wasn't listed if they were like mechanics or they were, people that rented cars or whatever. But it was three people who had seen George W. Bush and George H.W. Bush together with the third man. Of course, they didn't recognize who the third man was, but the guy that wrote the book ran him down, and he was one of the most feared people in either the Mossad or the Shin Bet. One of the two, and I can't remember which. And they were standing next to John's plane. And this was several days before the accident. At that time, W was campaigning. He was in Iowa or someplace on the day before. He disappeared for 3 days. Nobody has ever been able to go back and look at what his documents, whatever. That was sort of interesting. Maybe he was having an affair with somebody, took the opportunity to go off. I would say giant red flag, if that were true. Giant red flag, if that were true. If I can, I will go deep to find out if I believe it or not. However, it did at the time I read it. It just, Now, John, they say all the flight instructors that he had said that he was a very competent pilot and he was very organized. He followed all of the directions without them telling him every time what to do. They had nothing but good things to say about him. He had an accident sometime before the plane crash, and he was injured. It was on, he had a cast on his leg. He was walking on crutches. And so he was going up to Martha's Vineyard with the plane, and he would have definitely would have had a flight instructor in the plane with him. At the airport prior to the flight, he was there with Lauren Bissett. Carolyn Bissett, his wife, had not gotten there yet. She was a few minutes late. Then she got there, and they still waited for another 45 minutes before they started the takeoff. The thought is they were waiting for the flight instructor to get there. And so that's why they were a little bit late getting off the ground. Now, the plane had no problems, and it was 17 miles out from Martha's Vineyard. John was calling the tower there, telling them that he was starting his descent. They had that word, and then the time it would have taken to get there and land would have been, I think, 5 minutes. And so once they're notified that you're in your landing mode and you go past 5 minutes, automatically they call the NTSB and they call for people to come and see what's going on and what's happening. If you were 17 miles away, then you started your approach, and I think you were 14 miles away on the approach. Every plane has, I guess it's mandated that every plane have a feature that if it goes down, it automatically sends a signal out, planes down. I mean, you could bring it down and land it on ground, or it could go into the water, but it goes off. It's a signal that goes off. Then it starts to get a little jerky. That happened around 9:30 at night. And one of the first people that was contacted was Ted Kennedy. Ted Kennedy, I think he went right over to the airport where it was supposed to land. And then he got on the phone to the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard said they were going to send some planes to check. Turns out that the planes didn't really get started until 1 or 2 o'clock the next afternoon. Now, during that night, he kept trying to get things to happen. He called President Clinton's man, and then Clinton called him, Ted, back. He said, "I'm calling the Coast Guard." So I don't know what the hell they're holding them up. The departure of the flight was Friday the 16th. By July 21st, they found the fuselage and they found the bodies. The diver said they found the girls' bodies outside the fuselage. And the admiral later said that all 3 bodies were found inside the fuselage and that they all died on impact. The bodies were taken up on the same day, and the autopsy was performed, and they were then sent to Duxbury, Massachusetts for cremation. You're not going to see probably anywhere except what we're going to show you right now. Everything that you see, the government is saying that he shouldn't have went there without a flight instructor. They don't say who in the family when they say these things by the family, because the family says, "Who said that?" I don't know. Nobody knows who said it, but the people in the media are saying, and the family said this, the family said that. Well, obviously, there's some paperwork going around from the government saying, here's your story, here's this, here's that. That's very suspect, that the family would make any, especially at that time, make any aspersions to John not being a top young man in terms of what he did. They've tried to, sometimes they said it was a suicide. I mean, he's had millions of dollars. Why would he commit suicide? What we're going to show you is from a podcast that I saw recently. There's 2 major issues with it right now. One is, whenever they finally got the planes in the air, there were 2 airplanes and 2 helicopters from the Coast Guard. However, remember that the buzzer was going off on the down plane, probably 14 miles from Martha's Vineyard. The Coast Guard had set up a 20,000-mile grid. They had put the planes in but they were going all over the place, like they were wasting time, because first of all, the NTSB probably knew where the plane was because that thing went off, showing you where it's at, They keep mentioning in a lot of the YouTubes that John probably didn't take a flight instructor with him. Most of the family would say no. That we never said anything like that because he first of all, he had a bad leg and he was on crutches. They said just take the cast off a day before. And so he had crutches. He wanted to be in good shape with his wife and possibly his child because there was some thoughts that she might be pregnant and her sister and so forth. To be careful, that's all. So the family had a rough time with them pushing the no flight instructor. You're going to see a gentleman who was in the Navy at the time, he's out now, who's a diver, professional diver. And he was on the dive team that went down, and they have a cage kind of a thing. And they put things in the cage, and then the cage is brought up, like the plane will be brought up at the end by a crane that's on the ship. I think they worked for about a week. They took the bodies up first, and then they started finding things outside the fuselage and personal items. And a couple of things washed up on the shore right there at Martha's Vineyard. When they were just about finished, the diver said that he found a part of a skull with blonde hair.
We saw on camera, we had an ROV actually swim down there and plant right in front of the fuselage, and we saw him face fronted into the cockpit, and then we could see the blonde hair girls in the rear seats. Everyone's still seatbelted in. We recovered the 3 bodies. One detail was that JFK Jr.'s legs were, some people will say they were inside of him from impact. Fortunately, we found the kneecap in the cockpit dashboard, so that doesn't really happen when something goes inside of you. So they were very mangled, almost like a tin can just twisting on human flesh. It just cuts you up, tears you up. But yes, they were still seatbelted in. So we actually had to remove via cutting the seatbelts to then unfold the seats and unfold some metal a little bit to get them out. We put all 3 bodies into actual body bags down there and kept them on the side where we stored all the other stuff that we found on the plane in this like sort of cage on the bottom. But yeah, they were horribly mangled. It was very, very kind of distorted to see. They had been down long enough to where the water has kind of been soaking into them a little bit, kind of puffy, kind of look to them, but nothing glorious, you know. And fast forward to when they did finally pull the 3 bodies up and then took them in for the autopsy determined that it was just too mangled, too distraught to ever have any kind of open casket or any sort of anything. So they opted to do a burial at sea because of the nature of the bodies that we recovered.
Insane. And then while going over and explore different type of objects or things that were inside the plane, did you find anything that you never classified, but you can classify now after the 25 years accident? Anything that nobody knows?
I mean, so the black box, we were able to recover that, and I think that's how they determined that it was more or less operator error for the plane crash. But I mean, they were going to a wedding, I believe, so they had a lot of personal items. I mean, from Guns N' Roses CDs, you know, he had just broken his leg previously, so he was still kind of utilizing crutches. We found the set of crutches down there, a watch band, a hat that he had been wearing. So a lot of personal items we were able to pull out of there and then send it back to the family as they felt necessary. Some of it did wash ashore, but it was crazy how many personal items that we were able to pull up and then, you know, recover from it.
Nice. Yeah. But anything that you can tell now that like even the family doesn't know that you were able to recover, things like that?
I mean, again, just a lot of personal stuff. One of the biggest like maybe items that were, let's say, not recovered were when we were just about done taking care of the whole work site. We got probably, I would say, like 95% of the wreckage that was down there. One of the very, very last divers, even after they did the burial at sea, so bodies cremated, kind of, you know, said your farewells, we found, I'd probably say a quarter size of a scalp of blonde hair that had been wrapped around her umbilical. And so, you know, you're kind of putting your hose away to be done with the dive. And one of the divers said, topside, I have, you know, this substantial size scalp down here. And at one point, everyone was kind of like, well, what do we do? It's, make a decision. And basically just the topside diver said, no, you didn't. And so the diver below basically kind of unwound it from this Velcro boot that we utilize for chafing gear and just let it go into the open ocean and essentially barrel at sea, right? That's where the other bodies were. So this piece just kind of went away. But that was more one detail that you would never read about, hear about, know about, unless, you were actually there on site during the dives.
That brings up all the other assassinations. Sirhan shot his gun 8 times, but he never hit Kennedy, right, RFK. He didn't hit him. And there were 13 shots. So, he hit a lot of people with almost everybody he hit, all around, as they were frightened of it, guns going off. Anyway, and there were 4 shots, 2 in the ceiling and 2 in door framing. So that's 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's 12. And 3 from behind, 2 in the head, 1 in the back. Look how many shots there were. He couldn't, there's no way he could have done it. He got his 8 shots off. None of them hit Kennedy. That guy, Caesar, was right behind him. The cop, I know it because what convinced me was the tie on the floor laying next to him. Because when he felt that gun up there, he must have reached up like this to get the guy, and he got his tie. And then as he went down like this, the tie went out on the floor. Sirhan, RFK knows he didn't do it, and he's trying to get him out, RFK Jr. That was MK Ultra. They know how to process a guy to do that. The head psychologist at the hospital that the CIA uses has come clean on how it works and how they did it and so forth. It's sometimes when you do this kind of work, you have to be very careful not to get out ahead of yourself. Seeing what I've seen, I would say that it's worth some looking into. The fact that the government is pushing that Jack wasn't a very nice guy, the fact that they're telling some lies about the family, saying that Jack probably didn't want to have the flight instructor with him. He would look like the big shot, going driving at night in the air and all that. It was uncharacteristic of him to be that way. And so why they would do this is that you look at the way they operate and you see that could be. The truth is that both Mrs. Clinton and also W were looking to be presidents. The good bet would be that if John jumped in, he'd beat them both. When you have gotten away with killing one president, one would-be president, Robert, God knows how many other people they got away with killing. One more is just easy. It's easy. So for that very reason, I think that people should take a hard look, a really hard look at it. We lost Jesse Jackson this week. I always remember him saying, keep out the bushes, keep out of the bushes, keep out of the bushes. He was right. He was right.